Before we kick off, I'd like to sort of explain a little bit the manual for this session. This is not a parallel session where you sit in the audience, you do your emails and listen to what is said. This is a session where we will ask you to participate actively, where you're free to join the discussion at any moment in time. There's 2 microphones here, one at the south and one at the north. The moment that you feel you have a question, the moment that you feel you want to participate or raise a topic, you simply stand up, you move to one of the microphones, and then I will give the word to you, and then you'll get to ask your question or you get to provide your comments. Okay? I ask you to sort of, whenever you speak, to do that in a microphone rather than have a discussion amongst each other. Okay? Any questions about that? No? Okay. So, just as an initial framing, in December 2024, a naval vessel dragged its anchor through the Baltic Sea and ruptured one of the power cables, severing a vital power line between Finland and the Baltic states. This is just one example of how energy safety and resilience all of a sudden received a different connotation in the field of the decarbonization and the electrification that we're all working on here. Just this morning, I think I was made aware by Francois Koppenol, who sits here also in the panel. There is a press release that potentially Volkswagen has to stop manufacturing their cars because the provider of the chips, Nexperia from the Netherlands, is in a little trade war together with China, and they are no longer able to deliver chips, bringing a whole different meaning again to the topic of resilience and safety when it comes to the supply infrastructure that you have. And what we're trying to discuss today in this panel is what implications do the current geographic political developments have on the topic of energy safety, resilience and independence. And before we sort of set this stage and I ask Johan Söderbom to provide the insight from an infrastructure and technology perspective, I have a quick ask to the room and kindly answer with a raise of your hands. Who of you feels that achieving energy safety and resilience in the current political landscape in Europe can be achieved without compromises, systemic compromises on infrastructure? So there's 1, 2, 3, please raise it a little bit higher, 4, 5. So there is a small minority who feels that this can be done without compromise on the infrastructure. Okay, so maybe to kick off, Johan, I'd like to invite you to come up. I'll take the north. That's fine, you take the north, I'll stick to the south.
Thank you. Can you hear me? No mails?
No mails. Phone off.
Okay, thank you. Johan Söderbom, I'm also with InnoEnergy. I'm working on strategies when it comes to grid and energy storage. So this is a super interesting topic for me. And I will try to do a little bit of a fly-in when it comes to what the energy system today contra what we actually have decided in Europe to become in just a few years, the implications of that when it comes to resilience. So from our perspective, what we are actually looking at in Europe, it's actually it is a major transformation that we have decided to do. And that has been decided on European level, and it has been implemented in national member state regulations as well. And we have heard this in different forms in several of the other presentations that's been made during TBB these days. But what it really means is that today we are have an electricity market that covers about 3,000 terawatt hours a year. That's what we are generating, transmitting, consuming, and trading in the system. Outside that, there's about 10,000 terawatt hours, which is fossil. And what we have decided to do in a very short time is actually double the electricity market. So that's the way for us to actually do the transition to a low carbon society. So, and that's really a no-brainer, because we are taking out about 5,000 terawatt hours of fossil fuel out of the system.
Can I ask a question?
You can absolutely ask a question.
So when we double the energy market in a few years, aren't we increasing our vulnerability?
I will get to that. I actually will argue for that we're doing the opposite, that we're increasing the stability of the system when we're going towards a decarbonized system. So, but with this slide, I'm just trying to say that this is a transition that's going to happen. It's already started, and it's super hard to stop that, both on the generation and transmission as well as on the consumption side. So from that perspective, just ride with it, I would say. And in this case, the grid is extremely important in this. So let's focus a little bit on that. Resilience, of course, I go to Wikipedia, and its ability to recover from shock of some disturbance. For us, for me at least, that is the ability to maintain sufficient energy distribution in a disturbed situation. And that's super important. So I've made a little bit of comparison to what it looks like in a fossil-based system we have today, and what it will look like in near future when we go into a decarbonized system. So, and looking just at the primary fuels supply to Europe, that's 60% coming from outside, from fairly shaky sources as well. So very exposed to geopolitical risks in that respect. So, and going to a future situation where we have doubled the electricity capacity in the system, but we are adding that with the renewable resources, which we have control over. We don't maybe not have control over the weather, but we have to handle that in another way. But we have control of the primary source of energy there, at least. In a fossil system, we have substantial logistic problems, exposure at least, when it comes to the sea road or pipeline or whatever type of transport it is for the fuel in the system. Whereas in a future system, which is a largely inherent redundancy system, since we have a distributed generation portfolio, which makes this self-organizing almost. A little bit stretched there, but centralization, fewer centralized nodes as it is of today, that's a problem when some of that fall out. Decentralized system, again, is super resilient actually by nature. And then finally, the flexibility of the system, and that's in a wide perspective. In the flexibility we have in an incumbent system, we have a slow technology development. We know that. It's very hard to change the big existing players in that. Whereas what we need to add innovation, we need to add new technology, and we need to add rapid deployment in the new system we have. So a little bit of answer to your question there, Alexander. I tend to see that we will have a more resilient system when the way we are developing as it is of today. So. Another example, not an anchor this time, but a sabotage, which is quite famous. In one day or in one event, 15% of the gas supply to Europe was wiped out. That's pretty hard to defend a long pipeline in the Baltic Sea as this was. That had an enormous impact and still has an impact on infrastructure cost and electricity cost in Europe as it is of today. So if we more look at the defense aspect of this. So where the threat is some sort of a military threat. Then what else could be done by the future system? Well, that can actually improve even on the defense side. So given that we have a massive installation of offshore wind, that is definitely something that can act as a platform for above and underwater surveillance systems. So that's already in the making that this is happening. So already free of charge, that's available for the defense organization of the different coastal nations. So, did you have a question there, Alexander?
No, please continue.
Okay. Are you doing mail? Or no. Transport, electrification of that gives us a number of new refueling options for the system, instead of having to transport liquid fuels and tankers and stuff like that. So from that perspective, it's also something that's improving resilience of the system. Electrification, if we just take one isolated example where we see the development on battery technology based on drones, that has immensely improved the battery performance as we see today, and that the civilian society is definitely making benefit from that. And another example of large incumbent systems where we have the Zaporizhzhia power plant that has been used as a pawn in the war in Ukraine. If we take out these big vulnerable resources, then you also take out some of the attack vectors in a system like that. So, but I'll finalize this short presentation here with looking at it from even a little bit more narrow perspective. What are the startups and what are the technologies that can fit into this new system here? So I listed some vulnerabilities and challenges that we see to go towards the new distributed and decarbonized system. So, and of course, we need to deploy this quick. This has to be done fast, but that means fast permitting and things like that. And you all heard about the challenges of building anything, actually. And we need to increase the capacity of the grid. And in this case, we have startups that's working with that. I mentioned this surveillance platform prospect before, and there's a company called Elevated Launch that's doing this already. Core Power, that's here in the room today, and you can talk to them outside. They provide a new form of renewable resource for electricity that can be deployed offshore in conjunction with offshore wind, for example. That immediately increases the resilience of the system. Maintaining stability of the electricity system is also super important if we're using that as a main source for everything. Then it's long duration energy storage, short-term stability measures, microgrid, island capabilities, an efficient way of rerouting, increasing transmission capacity. And we have companies like Koppenol here that's deploying massively battery storage, but also providing something called grid forming capacity to the system. That's actually building the system, not just stabilizing it. So, Endline is here. With their digital twins, you can definitely have a better understanding of what the grid looks like, but also increase the capacity of the existing infrastructure we have. So, and a final point to this is that we need also to understand the existing hardware infrastructure we have. And then we have to understand the status of the grid, and we have to have something that can actually mediate when shit happens. So Hepta here has an opportunity. It has a very interesting way of mapping the system or surveilling the system from maintenance perspective, but that gives an excellent quick overview of what the grid looks like. And GDI, finally, battery technology to increase the battery.
So if I can just ask a question, because you are talking about resilience from the perspective that decentralized is de-risked more or less by design. You talked about grid resilience in terms of the grid. To which extent can innovations, and I invite the room to participate here. To which extent can your innovation contribute to resilience in the grid? Please? Both? Let's start. Let's start with Elviss from. No,
Hey.
please stay.
So Elviss from Hepta Insights. Thanks, Johan, for the presentation. Just wanted to add a few points. I think one important aspect, if we're talking about grid resilience, is also grid maintenance, right? And I would just like to add a few points. One is on grid visibility, and one is on data management around grids. So last time I checked, still most of the grid inspections in Europe are still conducted with helicopter-based inspections or on-ground inspections. What that means practically is, let's say you have a transmission line and there's a helicopter flying over, it's taking maybe 3 to 5 top-down images. You can only see so much of the defects, right? You can see some maybe visually really strong defects, but you cannot see like any other wiring issues or something like that. And this is something where I think the drone technology can be deployed, and where Hepta as well is deploying drone technology for data management and collection. For example, when we're finding a broken wire strand, right? It basically means that the power line between the two transmission towers has a broken wire strand, and it's visually very hard to see from a helicopter. But that wire strand actually can lead to the transmission line snatching apart. And there was a clear example this year for one of our customers in Latin America where a similar line to such a defect actually snatched apart for an important transmission customer. So I think first part is just kind of getting that full grid visibility, right, to understand where the maintenance decisions have to be deployed. And secondly, also around data management. What we still see in Europe and in other countries as well is that, distribution operators might have 1,000, let's say, per 1,000 people on ground collecting data around the grid, writing it down on a piece of paper. There's no centralized management system to understand, what are those top level defects? Do we need to maintain the whole line? Do we need to make different maintenance decisions? There's no software, right, for that. And just maybe to add and pitch in kind of Hepta here, what we do is we work with local data capture companies to capture the data using drones. So instead of having 3 top-down images of a power line, you have 200, 300 images of a transmission tower. And then we process all of that at scale using AI software. So that gives already clear, actionable insights to the grid operators of, these are the top 5 severity defects that we should fix. Otherwise, there might be, real danger for the grid. And we had a proven case study as well in Ukraine, where it actually was our largest customer before the war in Ukraine until 2022, where there was an old Soviet Union grid. It was inspected with on-ground tools, so basically people walking by the lines, looking at the lines, making maintenance decisions, and there was a lot of disconnections. And after switching to drone-based inspections of that grid and utilizing AI software, we were actually able to reduce the kind of disconnection duration SIDE by 3.3 times in those regions. So it is possible, but it's just a discussion about investments into the grid around the innovation. Just the point I wanted to add.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Johan here, Repono. I just wanted to touch upon the fear you raised, Alexander, regarding resilience as the electricity market grows, and expand on Johan's talking point regarding flexibility. So, as Johan said, Repono, we are sort of deploying hundreds of megawatts of grid forming capacity from battery energy storage systems in Europe. And batteries are an extremely flexible assets. They can provide grid inertia, voltage regulation if necessary. But I wanted to touch upon the importance of partnerships in order to enable that flexibility, such as, and then we have optimizers that helps bring that flexibility to the electricity market, such as Suena or Bamboo. That flexibility can help stabilize the electricity market. And I want to bring up a real-life an operational example from some of our systems that we are operating in Sweden, mainly in Gothenburg, the city where we have our headquarters. There, the grid operator runs a local flexibility market where they sort of, if they forecast and see stress or bottlenecks happening in the grid, they put out a sort of buy bid for capacity, and then we can take that battery capacity and bid in to mitigate those problems that they are sort of expecting. And it's not only batteries. As the sort of share of the electricity market is growing, we have a lot of other flexible resources, such as like vehicles, but you have industrial processes, you have heat pumps, and production units. You can regulate solar and wind as well. So that's sort of...
So flexibility, you say, in storage media is
Yes.
part of the resilience then?
And we're sort of seeing that spread now in that type of market. In April, Finland, the Finnish TSO started a FinFlex market where the TSO can procure capacity from sort of participants that has available flexibility.
Okay, thank you very much. But from your perspective, Manuel, sorry, yeah, I was just reading your message from Core Power. Tell me.
Yeah, I first would like to address some words on this, let's say, reliability of the systems and go back to April 28 in Iberia. I think that many of us here in the room remember this huge blackout that affected 60 million people. And about the role of innovators to really support solutions for this kind of resilience. In this case, we didn't have any disruption or any destruction in terms of assets. Everything was there, everything was in place, everything was running perfectly, but we had a blackout. So it's a kind of a different system issue that needs also to be properly addressed. And our role as innovators here, in my opinion, has to do with data collection, data management, and creating in the politicians the awareness about the new paradigm of managing grids. So I think this message needs to be, let's say, handed over to the politicians, because at the end of the day, what somehow defined the conditions for the blackout were the rules approved in the parliament on the grid codes. So we need to act also on this. In terms of resilience, what Core Power is developing are a set of devices that will be installed offshore. And together with these devices, we have power, we have communication, we have sensors, we have lots of useful information that is, of course, important for us to maintain the survival of our systems, because they need to be in place against very harsh environment. But this data that is helpful for us could be also helpful for other, and it could be important for the safety in oceanic environments. So that's something that we will be very keen to discuss with the authorities, and we are already doing that, starting in Portugal and also in other countries like UK, Scotland, for example.
So that's interesting. Thank you very much for your contribution. And before I go to the next question, perhaps a quick raise of hands. Are there any startups in the room here?
Yeah.
There's a few startups. And these startups, are we active in production, storage, grid? Who is in the grid?
Great.
Two are in the grid. So, and who is in production or storage? Production, energy production. Again. Okay. So we have a lot of non-startups in the room, right? Okay. So I'd like to understand, because these are parts solutions. So thank you very much. So I would like to get also a perspective from the startups in the room. How does your technology, do you feel, contribute to the resilience of the energy system? So just for you to think of, because I remember who raised their hand, so I'm going to pick you after a minute. But Rob, please.
I guess I'll kick that off. Rob Anstey, CEO, founder of GDI. I'll start with a morbid real-world story, and then I'll move to a book. The morbid story is Israel. Everyone in this room has heard about it. They dispersed a bunch of pagers, and these pagers had a payload. The payload's the battery. And I think one thing we really need to wake up to in both the US and in Europe is that batteries store a lot of energy. That's a great thing. It's also a very dangerous thing. They store a lot of energy. Right now, we've seen just in the last week, China is basically restricting dual-use high-energy batteries, graphite. We've already found backdoors in a variety of their systems. This brings me to the book, Lights Out. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend get it on tape or take a lick. Basically, the idea, the premise is they don't point out who the actor is, but we know it's either Russia or China. Backdoors put into all these systems. Batteries from China, BMS systems from China, drones from China, drone batteries from China. And in the case of a geopolitical crisis, such as potentially the invasion of Taiwan, a threat can be made that we will shut down your grid for a month. We will do it through hacking of your control systems. The batteries we made for you have inherent defects that we can trigger through the BMS system, turning them from batteries into bombs. And this is something that I think both the US and Europe have got to come to realize that that's why it's important to make things domestically in the US and in Europe, and hopefully continuing to work together.
And how do you contribute to that?
So what we're doing in Europe is we're building an anode factory. So we're working with the second largest glass company in Europe, AGC. We're working with minerals that come out of the ground. Ferroglobe basically has some of the largest silicon mines in the world in Spain and France. So we're using European raw materials, quartz, converting that into metallurgic silicon, converting that into silicon gas, and then coating that directly on European copper. That then can replace the graphite in high energy density lithium-ion batteries used for everything from mobility systems to grid systems. That's critical, because as much as we think we can surveil the systems, you can put defects in the batteries that are not going to show up on CAT scans or drone scans or software scans. And so it's very critical to start making batteries in Europe for Europe.
So you're talking about not only storage media, but you're talking about resilience in the supply chain.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Now, from your perspective, Manuel, from Enline, how does your technology contribute to the grid stability or resilience?
Very quick, but just to think about that, grids, transmission lines are the biggest infrastructure that ever built by the humans, and the principles of physics are the same, but we're still operating grids very similarly from almost the beginning, of course, with some technology advances. But we are talking about no flexibility, a lot of restrictions, N-1 and many criteria, substations operating with static parameters, no dynamics at all, and the worst is that we have no visibility what is happening along the lines. Means you see the substations, and then what is happening along the lines is a completely black box, okay? This is where we are now. And we are investing billions and trillions building solar farms, winds, electrification, EV, electrical vehicles. We are subsidizing everyone to put electrical panels, and we still have no visibility in the grids. I ask you guys, you believe this is nice?
I think this is an interesting question you're raising, and maybe we should, by a raise of hands, to which extent do we believe that the renewable infrastructure or the energy infrastructure, that it actually can be part of the safety infrastructure?
Yeah.
Okay, who would like to come forward and comment on that? Oh, come on. We cannot just raise hands and can just keep looking at our emails.
And just...
Yes, please.
And just to say one thing, and then I leave.
You don't have to
Inline,
leave.
no, I will leave to give space for the next to talk. Inline, developed, and John knows this, is the first sensorless digital twin that gives you full visibility from mechanical, electrical, electromagnetical, thermal, weather, anywhere in the grid, from the cable to the insulator to the tower to the foundation substations, anywhere, anytime, remotely implemented, and we are able to implement 3,000 kilometers per day per engineer.
Wow.
We can create the digital twin of the world if we want, even for free, just to put this in mind.
This is not a good business model.
No, wait a second. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You know why? Because once you have the digital twins of the biggest infrastructure on land, you want the most powerful information that everyone wants. And then the business
we have the
comes
new
later.
Google of the grid here. We have the, please, perhaps quickly state your name and then.
Yes, my name is Anne Overmare and I'm from Belgium. I work for Blue Cluster, that is an innovation cluster active in the blue economy, like offshore wind. I've been trying to talk to N-Line already 2 days, it didn't succeed, but it was stated here that offshore wind can be the sensor to know what is going on in the sea, and we are very actively working on that. There's also a lot of possibilities for startups there. I didn't see them here right now because they're not really directly related to the energy situation. But we, for instance, have companies like Marlings who are monitoring the cables, the export cables from the offshore wind farms, and they can also detect if a ship is going over it. So a lot of things are happening over there as well, and I believe that this is the future. We're also working hard on it. The only thing that we're not sure of yet, and maybe this is not for this debate, but who is going to pay for this? Because the offshore wind developers, they won't pay. They say, okay, I know I can be this sensor for you, but I won't pay for it.
I mean,
and
do we
will
have
in
any
the end be
investors
the
in the room?
consumer who has to pay for it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fair question. Yes, please. Then you.
Hi, my name is Paweł Warszycki. I'm CEO of Neseten. Let me be first a bit provocative if you are speaking about resilience and the question how renewable energy can contribute to the resilience. First of all, we in Europe, we are dreaming. We are dreaming because we think we've got perfect infrastructure, we've got perfect grids, and we are safe. Nothing more wrong. And that's why, in my opinion, and the second point, there is no one solution for all. If I would come and promote my bio-LNG, LNG as the only solution, I would be completely wrong. And it's the same about solar, wind, water, whatever. In the end of the day, I truly believe that renewable energy can be an important part of resilience of the system that is not being able to be destroyed, attacked, and this will be a patchwork of different solutions put together. But coming back to the first, because renewable energy can be produced everywhere, like wind, like solar, and this can also work independently as an island, as an off-grid. The question is only how we should combine using renewable energy to store and to create a system that combines grid, hard infrastructure, and flexible system using renewable energy, which is also part of our independency, because we can produce it by ourselves.
That's interesting. Thank you very much. Now, I think a lot of the solutions that we're now talking about is civilian-owned infrastructure that is at risk of sabotage or inertia in any shape or form harms our resilience. That brings me to the role that our defense organizations, national and internationally through Nato, may play in increasing this resilience. We have here Francisco, from NATO, and I'd like to ask you, could you help us frame a little bit the role and the updated framework also for NATO when it comes to contributing to the resilience and the safety of the infrastructure?
I'll do that, but I'll start by using Johan's slide not to disagree with anything he said, but to show him or to tell you a bit about the concerns we have, the security and defense-related concerns that this situation raises. First, if you look at this, where is this thing? It's not working. Well, if you look at the right side of the slide, the 10,000 terawatt water to 5,000 terawatt water, that raises the possibility that we may not have liquid fuels, sufficient liquid fuels for the heavy equipment that we need to operate and that we will continue operating for the decades to come. If you think of planes and tanks, they will not be battery powered, they will be powered by liquid fuels. We are concerned that in this process of decreasing of electrification, we may start missing or lacking the liquid fuels we need. On the left side of the screen, if you see all the infrastructure that is needed for the electrification, and it's already been mentioned by the GDI representative, all that comes from China. Two issues there. First, more connected, more hackable, and you've already said it all. And apart from that, we give the Chinese the chance to basically shut us down. That's a big concern. There's also, and as we've seen in Ukraine, the Russians go after the critical energy infrastructure. For the time being, it's only cyber attacks and anchors being dragged. We are sure that if things get worse, they will come after our infrastructure. Again, I'm not countering anything of what Johan said, but these are the concerns we have. Now, on your question, what are we doing to help mitigate these things? First of all, there are traditional military activities like Baltic Sentry and Task Force X. They have been created as an immediate response to what happened in the Baltic. We've also created this critical undersea infrastructure and the Critical Undersea Infrastructure Security Center at Marcom. What these two institutions do is to fuse information come from different sources, civilian and military. They blend everything and then spread it all over so that there is a better situational awareness. There's also something mainsail it's a complicated acronym. What they do is to, again, merge information coming from satellites, radars, sonars. They apply some AI magic and then, again, provide this 360 degrees real-time information of what's happening in the sea. These are maritime-centered activities. Getting out of the water, one thing that we're also doing, and I think will be very useful in the future, I'm directly connected to that because I'm working on it, it's to learn from the Ukrainians what they are doing to counter Russian attacks. I think that at this stage, no one knows as much as they do about what works and what does not work. Russian tactics, again, how they change and how we can defend against them. I'm working on something that is about transforming the observations made during the last 3 years in Ukraine and transforming those into lessons learned that I want to make as practical and as tactical level as possible and then distribute them to all allies so that, again, they have a practical compendium of what can be done. So learning from the Ukrainians is very useful. Other than that, there are things that are not exclusively or not exclusively related to the energy infrastructure, but have a clear application into the energy systems, which are a bunch of initiatives and policies that basically want to speed up early adoption of new technologies. They want to have allies pooling resources. They want to have the private side and the defense establishment working together to do something that we call security by design, which is basically the idea that the security infrastructure should include from the very beginning and throughout all phases of the research and development and of operations security concerns, so that the civilian side does not go in one direction and the defense establishment, the armed forces expect something completely different. So in a nutshell, this is what our concerns are and what we are doing about them. And just one last thing. There's a lot of money coming this way. You know about the Hague commitment to spend 5% on defense. Out of this 5%, 1.5 will not go directly or exclusively to defense equipment. It will go to defense and security related spending. A lot of that will be spent on resilience, including energy resilience. So there's money, apart from the EU's money, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want?
That's,
yeah.
well, I'd like to come to the money part because that's interesting, and we have Rita here from Faber who can talk a lot more about that. But before we go there, I have one question because there's a number of measures that you said NATO is currently designing in terms of policy suggestions to help secure or increase the energy security and resilience. Now, what I would be interested in, if the mandate of NATO is expanded, and maybe a question to you, but also to the room, if the NATO mandate is expanded to also help with the safeguarding of the energy safety and resilience, what impact does that have in terms of the demands that we put on this infrastructure? Can you give any insights in that?
Well, I think we expect demands to go up, and that's why we put so much emphasis on protecting infrastructure. For the time being, the most obvious expressions of this concern are, again, Baltic Sentry and Task Force X. These are very concrete, very clear examples of what we are doing, but I think the more we rely on the energy infrastructure, the more it will need to be protected. There is no doubt about that.
Okay, yep. Thank you very much. Yes, please.
I'm Peter Solmey. I'm actually a researcher, not a, kind of early stage innovator. But replying to the question of what we should do in defense and going a bit on what our colleague on the batteries were saying was we have to be made, critical energy things should be made in Europe. And for me, it's surprising how clear it is for me, and it's not clear for everyone. And I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, at the largest fair in photovoltaics, no one publicly admittedly, but everyone was asking themselves if the Iberian blackout was not made because of the Chinese inverters. The Chinese inverters, they put the data online, and everyone is okay with that. And I'm super surprised how convenient they made it in a way that everything is online, and we go with that. And online means in a server somewhere in China. And so for me, defense in energy would be made in Europe, controlled by Europe.
Maybe yes, please come. But maybe also a response from your perspective from NATO on that as well.
No, just to add something that I think is very important. As you all know, developing wave energy converters is terrible. It's difficult. No one so far succeed on this. We are trying now our best on that, and 75% of the supply chain is located in Portugal. Okay, and the rest comes from Europe. So most of the equipment and most of the supply chain is under control of European countries. So I think it is important also when evaluating new technologies and some innovations really to include these assessments because we are 100% European. Thank you.
And that's good.
So I just wanted to echo exactly what the two previous speakers had mentioned. I kind of feel like the West is asleep right now. There are Chinese soldiers in the Ukraine. The drones are being powered by Chinese technology and Chinese batteries. Chinese has active intelligence agents in Ukraine learning how to fight us. It's very possible some of these blackouts have been sabotaged, and we've been caught with intrusions into utility grids as small as 10,000 people cities. Our entire telecommunication background, the US has to admit this, they hijacked our entire telecommunications, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, on everything. So I guess my question to everyone in the room is, when are we going to realize that we've got to tighten this security before an event happens that we're going to massively regret, whether it's continued aggression from Russia or China getting more actively involved, even though I would argue they're already actively involved. And I think NATO is taking the right steps, but I think the civilian part needs to take more active steps, and I don't know what the answer is, because I think we're so focused on cost, we're so focused on price, and we are addicted to it. We are addicted to business models built on low-cost Chinese resources, materials, components. I'll end with one story, and then I'm going to sit down and shut up. I won't say who told me this, but it's kind of terrifying. They said there's a huge vulnerability in Norway because most of Norway's armed forces is reserve. And Now about 50% of Norway's reserve drive BYDs.
You don't have to wait.
So if we go into an active conflict and Norwegians go off to war, the Chinese will have videos and recordings of all of their troop movements, all of their bases, because the cars they drive are sensors. When are we going to do something about this?
It's a big question, and it's actually a lot of questions. But I think if I sort of take the punchline, then what you're highlighting is what the majority does not, what we don't discuss, and that is that all of a sudden in a business and in a world of decarbonization and clean energy, we are dealing with safety and defense, which was not necessarily part of our landscape before. Now, a lot of the technologies that we develop here and the startups that are here are financing their development with venture capital. And we have in our midst here a partner from Faber, Rita, Sousa. I'd like to ask you to comment on how you feel and how you see that the landscape is currently changing through this new lens.
Thank you. I can, well...
Yeah, I can...
That's great. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Eventually, if you allow me just to give 2 brief minutes about Faber, so who you are, because you invited us here today. So Faber is a Lisbon-based VC. We launched the firm 12 years ago with a long-term mission to be backing entrepreneurs who are innovating at the intersection of science and technology. So we're specialist investors in deep tech and early stage. We have 2 active mandates, meaning 2 areas within Faber that we're actively investing in, with tickets that go beyond pre-seed stage to early Series A between 250K to 1.5 million. So really first tickets for companies. But we invest across 2 main areas. One that is related to deep tech, early stage for companies that are developing AI, data, advanced computational, robotics. So it's sector agnostic, covering a lot of areas, different areas. And then the area that I'm dedicated to that relates to blue economy, so ocean data, ocean companies that are developing different types of technologies that are kind of ocean related and climate related across different areas, biotech, robotics, ocean decarbonization solutions, water desalination, and definitely enabling technologies for the renewables offshore. This is a broad landscape. We see many different applications, many different companies that, even in the ocean and climate tech funds, that have not the intention to be defense related, but have progressively been developing dual-use applications or see the potential for that, to strengthen the resilience of Europe, to strengthen safety aspects, to strengthen data governance, to strengthen cybersecurity. So they're also quite aware of these aspects. So we have a couple of companies in our portfolio, and I'm thinking of a couple. For instance, a company that is a Portuguese company called Simortech that is actually developing a technology that fits into as a plug and play into the desalination industry processes, and they recover brine, the entirety of the brine that is a subproduct of the processes, and out of the brine they extract additional fresh water, but critical minerals that are critical for many of the industries that we know today that are facing the challenges related to supply chain from obviously China, and I'm talking about magnesium, lithium, other types of minerals that the company can extract and provide as supply to the chemical industry that is potentially based in Europe, but potentially also based in the US or in other markets. So that's a good example of a company that is starting with a completely different, obviously targeted market, but is definitely thinking of these aspects to enhance the resilience within Europe. You started by asking, okay, we see a different and evolving landscape in terms of finance. It's true. So we see in two angles. So we are aware that there are increasing number of funds that are focused on defense for now. So we're definitely not focused on defense. So across the two mandates, we are focused on these different areas, companies that are developing these platforms, but have the potential to become dual use, because we see that as a de-risking strategy as well from their commercialization pathway. So we see that. But we see an increasing number of defense-related funds. We're increasing number of funds coming into these companies to potentially fund this path into dual-use applications. So that's the current landscape, obviously driven by the current geopolitical context. On the other hand, we also see the startups leveraging on these opportunities that arise and funding that is coming from the different navies, obviously entities, government-related entities that are putting a lot of money into potential developments of the technologies into applications that are directly defense-related. So the current landscape is evolving, and we see that coming up, obviously, within the current context.
Okay. So I'd like to understand also a little bit to the extent that you are now also having, because if I understand correctly, one of your funds has also received funding from the Nato Innovation Fund. So to which extent has that an impact on how you vet assets that you want to onboard? Is there additional due diligence or additional criteria that are involved in this specific fund?
Mm-hmm. Well, the NIF is one of the investors, LPs in Faber Science 3 fund. So it's not the area that I'm dedicated to within Faber. It's the other area of investment and the family of funds that I mentioned that is investing in deep tech, early stage companies that are developing AI and data platforms, robotics, advanced computation. And so the NIF is an anchor LP in this fund alongside other anchor LPs. It's public information. We have the European Investment Fund as anchor LP at Faber in both of our mandates, in both of our funds. And we, as far as I know, the purpose is that we are not defense-focused fund. Again, even in the Applied Science Fund, we keep the focus on investing in companies that fit into our investment criteria, but obviously with significant potential to be dual use, to have dual use applications, and to serve the purposes of increased European resilience, European safety, European security around the areas that we mentioned here. So obviously with strong supply chain concerns and awareness, to increased cybersecurity aspects, with strong focus on correct and cybersecurity aspects as well. So these startups, of course, have to go through these and have to ensure that they cover well these aspects, because these aspects are critical to obviously Europe's and Europe's safety in the days that we live today. So that's a little bit our comments towards the NIF as an anchor LP at Faber. But again, our strength and our focus is on dual use, not defense only.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think there was a comment from Nato.
I thought I was going to give very good news about what NATO can do in terms of funding and supporting research. You already spoke about the NIF. Rob knows about Diana, but in any case, I wanted to mention these two programs. The Defense Innovator Accelerator for the North Atlantic, Diana, and then the NATO Innovation Fund. I think the Innovation Fund currently has something like 1.5 billion that can be made available to startups. And Diana runs these, what are they called, technology challenges in different areas, including energy security. I think Rob can give you a more practical perspective of how they work, because his company is just waiting for the results of their participation in the...
And how do these tools, Francisco, tie in, and also for you, how do they tie in with policy measures that you take, like the Defense Production Act?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's about, not just developing something, but also producing it.
They complement each other, and I think there's a bit of a recognition that policy is one thing, and it takes time to get into, between having allies agreeing policy and things finally coming up with results, and this is a very immediate result. I don't know what's the time frame, but I think it's these technological challenges, they happen every year. So within a few months, you get an answer about whether you'll be supported by Diana or not. It gives you access to accelerator sites, to test sites, gives you mentoring, financing, of course. So I think there is a complementarity between the policy, which in many cases, unfortunately, stays there on someone's shelf or in a file, and then the practical and very concrete support.
Okay, thank you.
Well, on our side, obviously we see Diana as a very sound accelerator into this area. So we have a few companies in our portfolio that are in the process of applying to Diana and participating into this opportunity. It also comes as a stamp of credibility and recognition of the state-of-the-art technologies that can have this very good application into these dual-use applications and defense-related projects.
Well, thank you very much. Now, Rita, you were mentioning dual use now a number of times, and I'm starting to get a little bit, I'm having questions about this. And maybe the room knows, but who knows exactly what is the meaning of dual use?
I think it depends on the US versus Europe. So I'll comment on the Dana accelerator and then that. The US for sure has a requirement that any material that's used has to have a dual use because the demand ebbs and flows, and they can't have manufacturers go out of business when they're not buying. So basically you have to find, it doesn't have to be the exact same product, but you have to find an additional application for your product that doesn't have military specs. It's a very fine line. You can't sell something that matches military specs to a commercial client. You have to have a slightly modified version of that product that you can sell into the commercial market to make sure that your company is sustainable, you can get revenue from non-government sources. And so it's a fine line, and that's what sounds exciting about Dana is going to help companies who haven't done work in the European ecosystem understand all the different MODs and all the different requirements and all the different restrictions. I know Francois could probably give a whole nother talk on how to ensure that a certain product is okay for defense, but then a variation of that product doesn't require permission from authorities or permission from countries or permission from different MODs or DODs, whether that can be sold in the consumer market. So it's a requirement, but it's a very tricky requirement because they want you to thread a needle and say, make something for us, and then make something a little bit different that you can put in a cell phone.
Yeah. So perhaps, Francois, this is a time for you to because that makes it sound almost like I can determine myself whether my battery is dual use or not. Is it really that simple? Francois Koppenol, senior partner at Meijburg Legal.
Yeah, you would put a lot of consultants and lawyers out of business, so I think not. But I think that's also a bit of the bad news. It's very complex, like Rob said. It's very complex to determine when is what you're doing, what you're investing in dual use, and when is it not. And that's not the only question that you have to ask yourself. So I think the dangers that Rob referred to are also recognized by the European Union, and they try to protect it also from a legal perspective. So in making laws, the European Union tries to improve the resilience here. And the thing is, on the back, for example, of the dual-use export regulations, which, well, regulate the export of dual-use outside the EU, they made the foreign direct investment regulation, which is the other way around, which makes sure that critical infrastructure, the things on the dual-use list, but also other sensitive stuff, and I say it like that for a reason, are subject to foreign direct investment scrutiny. So that means that if you're investing in or if you're getting invested in and your product falls in, well, dual use or other categories of sensitive information, technology, then you are to be scrutinized. And not only on a change of control, so that exit far away, but also if somebody gets a percentage, 10, 20%, or the right to appoint a board member, already that might be subject to approval by the authorities. And combining that with that it's difficult to assess whether or not some technology falls or doesn't fall under the scope, on the one hand, I think it's very good because I think we all want to address those risks that the European Union is doing this. Some say they are doing it a bit too late. It's always reactive, right? So based on recent events, they're looking to update the lists, but some say, again, it's a little too late, but whatever, I think the idea is very good. The execution, as often, is complex because you not only have the technical complexity, but it's a regulation which is implemented by all the different EU countries in a slightly different way. So the basis is the same, but in each country, so it depends on where you're located, the execution is a bit different. The lists are a bit different. What qualifies as foreign, and that's the takeaway I want to end this mini lecture on, but the takeaway is that what is foreign, such a basic concept, differs per country. So some countries say if you get an investment from outside the EU, then, and obviously your technology falls in the scope, then you need our approval. Some European countries say, well, if it's outside our own country, you need approval. So even EU to EU would be part of the approval. And then the bombshell to end up, the Netherlands like to be very controlling, so we don't have any foreign aspect at all. So even if a Dutch investment fund would invest in a Dutch company subject to FDI regulation, you would still need to go to the regulator. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't invest or shouldn't do your product or do whatever you're doing because of the regulations. But I think it's helpful that you know that they are there. And what we see, because it's such a complex and rapidly expanding and changing landscape, we see that a lot of funds and startups, my law firm is part of the KPMG network, so we see a lot of European, global, but also European funds and startups. It's just not on the radar. And I understand that completely. But in order that you have a smooth investment, smooth installation, go-to-market, etc. process, I think it's very helpful. Obviously, it's also a bit of a sales pitch, but you have understood that by now. It makes sense that you know where you're at in that whole list, category, type of investment, and what that means. It also means that it makes a difference in which European country you're going to locate yourself. The good news is, within the European Union, it's very easy to move around in terms of people and goods and production facilities. But I think the good news is, Rob, also we are trying to do something, albeit a bit slow and highly complex, but hopefully it's also good news. Was that the short answer on whether it was simple to assess whether it's dual use?
I don't know about the room, but I was sort of hoping that there is a webpage that I can go to and check whether I am dual use or not.
Well, it's all public information, of course, right? So if you start with the dual-use export lists, you have all the information there. But I think what you need to have is you have to have a technical person and a, let's say, not necessarily a lawyer, but a more administrative person, could be a lawyer, because it's a mix of very technical, but also very many references to legislation, etc. But I think if you have a team of those two people sitting behind the dual-use expert lists, you're going to have 75%. The challenge is that each country has its own edition. That's the tricky part.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. It's actually a very complicated tale that we have to a session where we were trying to establish the opportunities, but I think we're ending with restrictions.
Well, I also hope that there's a little role for AI there, because in the end, it is obviously all rule-based. It's just a lot of rules.
Yeah, okay. Before we close the session, because we've hit the hour, we've come to the end, I would like to ask one more time, are there any subjects that are unaddressed? Because now would be the time to stand up. John, yes, please come, both.
I have one thing I'd like to stress. I'm Carl, I'm from Rosilicon. I'm a startup in the production of polysilicon. So it's nothing to do with defense in the first thing. But what Rob already said, it starts with that. If we are dependable on China with all the steps, if we have the raw material, which you have to come out of China, the rest can't be done. So, I thought Nato with 1.5 billion, but we need to put up a plant which costs 900 million. But there it starts. Yeah. So when it starts there, then we can do the whole value chain. Then we can make the light batteries. Then we can make the renewable energy for the solar and be independable for solar. But also with batteries, but also the polysilicon we use for the chips. Well, the dependable is there clear. So let's not forget that it starts there instead of all talk about AI and the last thing in the value chain. So that's what I like to stress.
That's valuable. Thank you. Thank you.
From my side, this is John from InnoEnergy. I would like maybe to end with some question reflection, maybe towards Francisco or Francois. That might be, we have been talking about supply chain, we have been talking about investment, etc., from the dual use perspective, but what's going on with the governance? How do we deal with the governance of the companies, etc., when you can shift the strategies from one place to another? Do you have any quick answer for that?
It's not a good one. I don't think NATO gets involved into the governance of companies.
Well, it is part of the legislation, right? That they're also wanting to control who is actually in the boards, the supervisory boards. And I think going circle to the incident or developments that Alexander mentioned at the beginning of this session. So what's basically happening with Nexperia is that the Dutch government is saying, well, we want to have more influence in how this company is run in the Netherlands. So I think through a legislative process, that is being done. But to my earlier point, I do think it's going very slowly.
Maybe one follow-on question on what you're saying. Does that mean when you talk that the implications on governance that I have to take into account as a startup that, for instance, the origin of my board members matter?
Very short answer, yes. And I think there are a few countries, some of them have been named, where there's a kind of common understanding currently in at least Europe that those might be countries that we do not trust our technology with. But the thing is, that list is obviously also changing all the time, which I guess is an additional hurdle.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yes, Rita?
I think, and based also on our experience, there's an increasing need to do proper KYCs to the investors that join the companies. So the cap table is, and equity is the main asset of the company, for sure. So you need to be very careful who you bring on board. And because that will also impact your ability to raise in the future, because some investors may have, obviously, reasons and that will not enable them to co-invest with some investors based on the geographies, based on those aspects that we know. So that's a very sensitive topic that you need to consider more and more in the current context. But investors usually are very aware of these topics. So the ones that are in the cap table of the companies and the ones that are obviously looking at companies to invest in. If they're potential investors in the cap table, that may be a red flag. Well, that's the current case for us. So we may not join a company that may have certain investors in the cap table, and also on the other way around. So that's a topic that you should increasingly consider while you keep growing the companies.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think one thing is for sure. I think this is a subject where probably on parts and parcels that covers resilience and safety in the context of energy, it deserves not just an hour of a discussion where, in all honesty, we are able to scratch the surface. I think the landscape has become infinitely more complicated for early stage investors to navigate in, for the legal departments in terms of navigating the governance and the FDI, but also for the startups here in the room in terms of the demands the system puts on you in being aware of what the impact of your products are in the supply chain. And on top of that, I think we all need to worry about where our raw materials and our supply chains lead to in order to make sure that once we're finally there, that we can manufacture, that we're not susceptible to vulnerabilities in our supply chain. So I think there's a lot more to discuss moving forward. I do hope that this panel at least contributed to igniting a thought process more towards this direction. I'd like to thank you all for your participation and looking forward to see you next time. Thank you.